founding father without a father. Got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter, by being a self-starter.
Hamilton is one of the few founding fathers who is not well remembered. But all that changed in 2008, when Lin-Manuel Miranda read the book Hamilton by Chernow, written in April of 2004. It was this book which inspired Miranda to write Hamilton, an American Musical, a play that would help change the way we view history. Let's start at the beginning. Hamilton is one of the least talked about founding fathers, despite having accomplished so much in his short life.
Alexander joins forces with James Madison and John Jay to write a series of essays defending the new United States Constitution entitled the Federalist Papers. The plan was to write a total of 25 essays, the work divided evenly among the three men. In the end, they wrote 85 essays in the span of 6 months. John Jay got sick after writing 5. James Madison wrote 29. Hamilton wrote the other 51.
I'll give him this. His financial system is a work of genius. I couldn't undo it if I tried. And I tried.
He took our country from bankruptcy to prosperity. I hate to admit it, but he doesn't get enough credit for all the credit that he gave us.
As is said in the musical, Hamilton was born January 11th, 1755 in the Caribbean, where he studied and wrote until he could afford his way to America.
I wrote my way out, wrote everything down far as I could see. I wrote my way out, I looked up and the town had its eyes on me. They passed a plate around, and total strangers moved to kindness by my story. Raised enough for me to book passage on a ship that was New York bound.
There he began his studies in law until the American Revolutionary War broke out. He played a fundamental role, standing next to George Washington until the war was over. One thing that is not mentioned in the play, however, is during the peace talks with Great Britain, Hamilton warned Washington of a rising mutiny in the troops, because the government at the time was considering not paying the soldiers. Which leads to the next point. One of the most important things Hamilton ever did was to help deconstruct the Articles of Confederation and replace it with the Constitution, which remains the backbone of America's government to this day. Now, the Articles of Confederation are never addressed by name in the musical. However, it is implied twice during the song Non-Stop.
Hamilton at the Constitutional Convention.
I was chosen for the Constitutional Convention.
The Constitutional Convention was a meeting of delegates from the original 13 colonies, which began to break down the flawed Articles of Confederation, but using its foundation to form the Constitution. Then we have this.
My client needs a strong defense. You're the solution.
Who's your client?
The new U.S. Constitution.
No.
Hear me out.
No way.
A series of essays anonymously published defending the document to the public.
No one will read it.
I disagree.
And if it fails?
That's why we need it.
Constitution's a mess.
So it needs amendments.
It's full of contradictions.
So is independence. We have to start somewhere.
No way.
You're making a mistake.
Good night.
By this point, the Constitution had been put into effect. But seeing as there was no way for this one original document to contain all the laws the country needed to flourish, and be flexible enough to change as our country progressed, amendments were added later on. After the Revolutionary War and the implementation of the Constitution, Hamilton was granted the position of Treasury Secretary, which allowed him to follow his ambitions of founding a national bank.
Are you ready for a cabinet meeting? The issue on the table, Secretary Hamilton's plan to assume state debts and establish a national bank.
While many states, specifically southern states, were against this in the beginning.
Ooh, if the shoe fits, wear it. If New York's in debt, why should Virginia bear it? Our debts are paid, I'm afraid. Don't tax the South, cause we got it made in the shade.
They eventually agreed, under the circumstances that the nation's capital would be in the South.
Two Virginians and an immigrant walk into a room diametrically opposed foes. They emerge with a compromise, having opened doors that were previously closed. The immigrant emerges with unprecedented financial power, a system he can shape however he wants. The Virginians emerge with the nation's capital.
One common misconception is that Alexander Hamilton assumed the presidency during his life, when in reality a series of mistakes and poor choices led him to never being able to run. This includes, but is not limited to, his extramarital affair with Reynolds. When colleagues found out about this affair, Hamilton decided it best to tell the public about it himself, rather than giving that power to his political opponents, dooming his chances at the presidency.
Mrs. Hamilton, with our children being absent on a visit to her father.
No.
Have you read this? Never gonna be president now. We're never gonna be president now. We're never gonna be president now. One less thing to worry about. One less thing to worry about.
These mistakes didn't mean that his opinion wasn't well respected, though. In the election of 1800, many people wanted to know what Hamilton's viewpoint was.
It's a tie.
It's up to the delegates. It's up to Hamilton.
Yo! The people are asking to hear my voice. The country is facing a difficult choice. And if you were to ask me who I'd promote, Jefferson has my vote.
This actually ended up swaying the vote.
Well, I'll be damned. Well, I'll be damned.
Hamilton's on your side.
And
You won in a landslide.
The decision to back Thomas Jefferson was the last of many political moves Hamilton made that made it seem like he had it out for Aaron Burr's career. At this point, the usually level-headed and noble Burr had been pushed to his limit and challenged Hamilton to a duel. Duels were still commonplace at this point in history, and actually took a rather long time to get rid of. It was this duel which would be Hamilton's end.
Raise a glass to freedom.
he aims his pistol at the sky.
After his death, Hamilton's legacy was carried on by his wife, Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton, who until her death made a point to tell the story of her husband, something she also taught her children. She was never certain if her actions were enough to preserve her husband's legacy, especially against the negative press he received from his previous political opponents. In the musical, this is shown in an interesting way. After Eliza's death, at the end of the song, "Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story," Alexander leads Eliza to the front of the stage, where she suddenly gasps and begins to sob. That moment is supposed to be a fourth wall break, in which Hamilton is showing Eliza the play itself, and as the lights come back on, she realizes that the house is full of people, and she succeeded in telling his story. And it is turned into this musical.
It's only a matter of time. Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Will they tell your story?
The final thing to note is the effect that Hamilton, an American musical, has had on the world. Apart from the obvious of introducing a whole new generation to the history of the United States and many of the lives of its founding fathers, it has had some interesting implications elsewhere. This includes Broadway. Much of Hamilton's success came from the way it was shared on social media. Soon, other productions rose to fame in this same manner, and thus it was dubbed the Hamilton Effect. There is also the fact that Alexander Hamilton was originally going to be taken off the $10 bill, but due to the outcry from Hamilton fans, it was decided in 2016 that he would remain, and instead Andrew Jackson would be replaced on the $20 bill with Harriet Tubman. So there you have it, a founding father who helped write the history of this nation, and is continuing to affect the way it moves forward even today.
This is Hamilton.